You know what? There's a lot of popular engine combinations out there. LS, Coyote, small block and big block Ford, small block and big block Chevy. But guess what? This video is for the other guys. So what exactly do we mean by the other guys? Well, think about this. When we're talking about small block Chevys, everybody knows the 350, the 327, even the 302. But when was the last time you saw somebody do a performance build on a 307, a 265, heck, even a 283? And if you're talking about small block Fords, sure, we all love a 351 or a 302. But when was the last time you saw a 289 or even a 260? That's right. What about a Cleveland? Heck, any Cleveland. Better yet, what about a 400M? When was the last time you saw a buildup on a 400M? I've done those and I'm gonna post them. That's what the other guys is all about. So today I'm gonna start out with a 4.3 liter V6. Chevy made a ton of them. Not very many people are hopping them up because it's so much easier just to choose a small block. But the V6 works really well. So when was the last time you saw somebody put a V6 up on the dyno, add a camshaft, then add boost? That's right, we're gonna supercharge the 4.3. Let's get going. In this video, I went to the junkyard, picked up a 4.3 liter V6. A late model version with a balance shaft. Now I know everybody has their favorite, but I wanted to get this one from the wrecking yard because I wanted to play with the balance shaft motor. Besides, that has good heads on it, they flow well, and it should make good power. To put it up on the dyno, I disassembled it, we rebuilt it, because this motor was actually going in a boat application. So we purposely made it a mild buildup. Now, what I did was replace the factory fuel injection, because this was a fuel injected motor, replace the factory fuel injection with simple carburation, an Edelbrock dual plane intake, and a matching carburetor. I also put a very mild camshaft in it, again, because it was going in a boat. But while we had it on the dyno, I stepped things up. I put a healthier comp cam in it. I'm gonna go ahead and put the specs up right here to help this thing make power. In addition to that, I also decided I'm gonna run some boost. Now, I always loved the Cyclone and Typhoon motors that GM did, so I wanted to make my own. It wasn't exactly like that because obviously I didn't have a turbocharger. Rather than the turbo, I selected a TorqStorm Supercharger. And the reason I did that, not that I think it's the best supercharger application or that it's better than a turbo, but what I really liked about the TorqStorm is I had a small block Chevy TorqStorm kit. And guess what? It fits right on the V6. You see all the mounting points for the small block Chevy are the same on the 4.3 liter V6. Basically, the front half is exactly the same. So my TorqStorm Supercharger kit bolted right up to this V6, gave me the opportunity to apply boost to the little 4.3. So let's get this motor up on the dyno, find out how it does, find out how the modifications did, then add some boost. In addition to this test being about the other guys, I'm also trying out a new webcam, so we'll find out how all this works. But our 4.3 liter V6 was a 93 or 94 version. I went to the wrecking yard. We got it from an Astro van. They're a little bit harder to take out, but you'll see a lot of them there. I don't see a lot of S10s there that also have this 4.3 liter, but lots and lots of the Safari vans and the Astro vans and stuff, so they're easy to find. And as I said before, I wanted to find one with a balance shaft. They run a little smoother. I've tried a lot of the other 4.3 liters, the non-balance shaft stuff, and I hadn't tried one of these, so I thought it was about time I did. I heard that the heads flow really well and they make good power, so I also wanted to try that. We went to the wrecking yard, picked one of these up, brought it home, and what I did was we took it apart and put rings and bearings in it and stuff, and just put it back together. We did some surfacing on the block and on the heads. We took a look at the valve job, actually turned out to be pretty good, just touched them a little bit, and all that stuff went back together. We put it back together with the stock cam, but the one change that we did make is rather than run the fuel injection, which we were not going to run, we replaced that with an Edelbrock dual plane intake, a performer intake, and one of their matching Edelbrock carburetors. I like those, especially for this kind of mild application. Those carburetors work pretty well, and we liked it on this combination. We put the motor up, and unfortunately for me, looking through the hundreds of headers that we have at West Tech, we did not have a set for a V6. Now I thought about modifying a set from a V8 to work on this, but there was really no easy fix, and I couldn't find anything in time to run this test. So we ended up running the stock exhaust manifolds, and then we ran a section of pipe extending those. So there would certainly be more power if I had a true long tube header for this 4.3 liter. But running this configuration, as we always do with an electric water pump, and the stock small block Chevy pump bolts onto that, no problem. So run with those exhaust manifolds and an open exhaust. Obviously we tuned this thing, we put a distributor in it, and we put an MSD V6 distributor to work with this combination of the carburetor and intake manifold. And then after tuning the timing to figure out how much it wanted and playing with the carburetor a little bit, we actually didn't have to do too much adjustment on this stock combination. It worked out pretty well. But on this stock carbureted version now of the 4.3 liter, our 4.3 liter produced, let's see here, 282 or so foot-pounds of torque and 206 or 7 horsepower, which is kind of pretty close to what they're rated at. I think that this was originally a 200 horsepower version, so this combination worked well. But now let's take a look and see what happened after we installed our comp cam. I'll go ahead and put the specs up here, but it was a 224 cam, so it was a pretty big step up, because I'm sure that the factory cam is a 2.0 something, maybe even in the 190s. So let's take a look and see what happened after we installed our camshaft upgrade. You see we got a pretty big jump in power. We went from 206 all the way up to 251 horsepower. So that camshaft offered a lot of power. Now, as you can see down low, below 3,000. So if this is something you were idling around, which is why we didn't use this camshaft in the boat application, because it spends more of its time at much lower engine speeds. Very rarely is this thing running, certainly it's almost always less than 4,500 and probably more like in the 3,500 and lower range, even at full throttle. So you'd want to be able to cruise around in the marina and the harbor area and stuff. So this wouldn't be a good cam unless you were trying to race to get somewhere in your boat. But for our dyno purposes, it worked awesome. We picked up a ton of power with this cam. And as you can see, the little V6, there's plenty of power to be had. So now let's take a look and see what happened after we have this combination with our camshaft and install our TorqStorm Supercharger. After running our combination with the healthy comp cam and our 4.3 liter V6, now carbureted, it was making a little over 250 horsepower and nearly 300 foot-pounds of torque. So that's a pretty good combination for a V6. You will remember that before we put our cam in there, our stock motor was down around 207 or so, and now it was time for some boost. As I mentioned before in the introduction to this, I installed the TorqStorm Supercharger, and the reason for that is because it bolted on. I had a kit that was designed for a small block Chevy, and the kit bolted right onto this 4.3 liter V6. I don't think that the guys from TorqStorm even had this in mind when I did it, but hey, we have it. We have the V6. It bolts on just fine. So here's what happened when we installed the TorqStorm Supercharger. Yes, lots and lots of power. As a matter of fact, I shut this thing off early because it was making a lot of boost. I'll go ahead and show you the peak boost and maybe even show you the boost curve here. You can take a look at it, but it was getting a little bit, maybe a little bit out of control. And it's important to note that even though on the video that we show running this thing with the TorqStorm Supercharger, we tried running it first with the Edelbrock carburetor and blowing through the Edelbrock carburetor. Unfortunately, that did not work. So we ended up putting the CSU blow-through 850 Holley that we run on everything, and that allowed us to make this kind of power and not have any problem. The other thing that I didn't do that I could have done is we didn't run an intercooler on this combination. And though we were blowing through the carburetor, we ran this thing just to make sure that we didn't hurt anything on this, because as I said, it was eventually going in the boat. We didn't want to hurt it, so I put good gas in this thing. We ran it on 100 octane race gas. But you obviously, if you had the right kind of carburetor, and you were supercharging this thing or turbocharging it, you could run it with the 85. You could also run it with an intercooler. So if I was going a little bit more crazy on this thing, I definitely would probably run an intercooler on it, even with a blow-through carburetor. If I was going to run it fuel injected, I definitely would run an intercooler, and I probably would choose E85 because we would pick up power and you'd pick up cooling, and you know, E85 is a lot cheaper than the race gas, so it's just a much better combination. But in this configuration, our supercharged 4.3 liter, our faux cyclone or typhoon motor, was over 450 horsepower. As a matter of fact, it was close to 460. So it made good power, and you know, you can see from the curve, it was still climbing. If we rev this thing to 6,000 RPM, it would obviously keep going. It's got a rising boost curve. So this thing made good power. I like this little 4.3 liter, and it definitely makes me want to try another one. Let's get to our conclusion. Okay guys, what did you think about our test on the other guys? You know, this 4.3 liter V6. Now I'm going to do a ton of stuff later on with other engine applications, but I thought this was a good start. I love the little 4.3 liter V6. There are a ton of them available in wrecking yards. Also, they make pretty good power. I would, however, like to see even more aftermarket support. You see, this motor is 3/4 of a small block Chevy, so I'd like to see 3/4 of the support for this little V6 that the small block Chevy enjoys. I'd like to see more cylinder heads and especially more intake manifolds. With more of that set to choose from, I think we'd see more people modifying these and making power. But what I want to do later on is I want to go get another one of these motors because I think there's a lot more power left. I'd like to do some head porting. I'd like to actually put some headers on this thing. I'd like to try different cam profiles, and then I'd like to add even more boost. Heck, maybe even a turbo. I'll actually make a cyclone motor. But for now, this combination worked out really well. We made a ton of power. The motor got put in a boat. It's actually out driving around, so it all worked out awesome. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. I'll keep testing, even the other guys.